Hi guys, welcome to this channel. And if you're new here, please subscribe immediately. Today we'll be looking at basic Excel functions: sum, average, count A, if, and OR function. Are you ready for this? Let's go. The link to download the data used in this tutorial is in the description, so click to download and follow through. All right, so first, we want to do basic arithmetic operations in Excel. And how do you do that? Calculations in Excel begin with an equal to. So once you enter an equal to, you can do a calculation, you can impute functions, and you can do various form of operations, and you can get really complicated pretty fast. All right, so the very first thing here is to pick the cell of interest. So here we want to calculate revenue, which is price asterisk quantity. So what have we done? Equal to G2. So G2 here picks the price, and then asterisk is for multiplication, then quantity is the next cell, and then we hit enter. So once you do that, you see 20 times 2 is 40, and that is very easy. So to populate this, just like you already know in Excel, all right, so you just quickly click on this drop down and it populates the entire column for you. Now you can do the same thing to do subtraction. So this can just be 20 minus 2, and that is 18, right? You can do the same thing for division. So you can do 20 divided by 2, and that is 10. But for this particular tutorial, what we are doing here is multiplication, and that is 20 times 2. And recall how we did it, making use of asterisks for multiplication. So I just click and it pre-populates. The next thing I want to show you is how to do sum, which is pretty easy. You begin with an equal to. You enter the name of the formula or the function, which is sum. Open up the brackets and then click the cells that you want to add up. In our case, we're adding H2 till the end of the data, right? So we just pick revenue H2, and then we pick the end of the data, which is 851. So just in case you're wondering how I did that, what I did was pretty simple. Okay, so I just did sum equal to H2, right? Can you see that? And then colon. So I just highlighted the entire cells, and then it took me to 851. So if you know the end of your data, so what did I do to highlight? Recall I had mentioned that earlier. So you could just do Control Shift. So let's just go through that again so that everybody gets it clearly. Okay, so that is sum. You open a parenthesis, you click the first cell that you want to sum, right? You put this, right? You put your colon, then you click Control Shift, then the down arrow key. Control Shift down arrow key, and make sure you're clicking it starting from the beginning. So once you do that, sorry, it's not right. So once you do that, okay, so I'm sure you know, basically just populate, or you could just quickly type it in and then it populates for you. All right, so next we want to look at its average. So same thing, equal to average. So we want to look at average price of the goods sold. So on average, right? So basically we just pick our price colon is G. So pick G2, and then G851, close it up, and we have our average. So in case you're wondering why mine is formatted in dollars, I already did that, and this is how you can do the same. You can format your cell into any form. So here you just come to home tab, click here in currency, and then pick currency. I prefer, so I'm working with dollar here, so that is why you have it in dollar. And if you want to change the denomination, just come here, click this pop-up, go to currency, choose your currency of interest. So you come here, symbol, choose, you see different currencies, right? You choose the currency of interest, and then once you pick it, it populates. And this is for decimal places. You can adjust accordingly, zero decimal place, two decimal place, and all right, so let's move quickly. The next thing we want to look at is count. So assuming you want to know the count of goods sold, so you want to count by product ID. Now, two things to note here: we have count and we have count A. Count only works on numerical values, while count A works on any form of value, whether text, number, decimal, any form of text, basically, any form of character, basically. And of course, also to mention that when you use count A, if you have blanks, so let's say the blank is, if you have a space, it will count. But if you have a blank, it will not count. So let me show you that very quickly. So first we use count here, and we're going to use count first of all on quantity. So trying to count on quantity, because count only works on numbers, right? So what do we have there? We have E2 and we have E851, and you close your bracket, you have 850 as the count of goods sold. Now, assuming I want to do this same thing using product ID, which is right, because you don't want to count based on quantity. So, okay, so what do we have? We have D2 for product ID, and we'll change this to D, and we'll hit enter. You will it returns 0, and that is because count does not work on numerical values. So if I want to achieve this same thing, right, on product ID, which is a test, I'll use count A. And the moment I hit enter, I get my count as 850. Okay, so let's get it started. So assuming you want to do some checks on your data, such that you want to say if any buyer buys a quantity that is more than 2, right, and that buyer has a customer ID that is greater than 20, then mark that buyer as bulk and prestige. Let me say that again. Say a buyer buys a quantity that is greater than 2, and then has a customer ID that is greater than 20, mark the buyer as prestige and bulk. How do you achieve that? Okay, so let's call it customer category. Okay, so I'll just come here, double click to expand it to fit the size of the test. Okay, so what do we do? You start with an equal to, as usual. Now, in this case, we are looking at two conditions. Have an and, right? And then you want to mark the buyer as something. So this tells us that we are going to combine two functions in one. We're going to combine an if, and we are going to combine an and. So let me first explain if, I will explain and, then I will merge it, right, to help us achieve what we have in mind. So what's an if function? An if function is a function that checks a logic and then returns a value if it is true, or returns false if that logic is not true. So what do we mean by logic? If you recall logic, logic just means conditions that are either true or false. All right, so let's start by first saying if so here you could say if quantity, right? So I just did just as usual. If E2 representing quantity now is greater than 2, this is for a start, right? Now, if you want to enter a test in Excel, you would have to make use of double quotations. Okay, so I just open and close so that I don't forget, right? That's the best practice. Okay, so if quantity is greater than 2, for example, then mark it as bulk S, mark it as not bulk. That's all. That's if condition for you. If quantity is greater than 2, mark up as bulk, else not bulk. Hit enter. The mark this guy as not bulk. Why? The quantity is 2. So the condition says if it is greater than 2, it should be bulk. So if I just double click here, it populates the rest for me. So this guy is bulk because the quantity is greater than 3. So you can use this to do your filtering, to pick certain categories of customers and the likes. Okay, so how about and function? Now, let's say I come over and I want to say if quantity is greater than 2, right? So here I'll say quantity greater than 2. I'll put a comma. So remember, and is comparing two or more logics, right? Okay, so and customer ID, so I pick customer ID value, right, is greater than 20. That's all. So now look at this. Checking two conditions here. If quantity is greater than 2, in this case, quantity is not greater than 2, and customer ID is greater than 20. So customer ID is greater than 20, but quantity is not greater than 2. So the condition returns false. Okay, so you can do the same thing. Click to drop down. Then if you look at this, quantity here is 3 greater than 2, and the customer ID is greater than 38. So it returns the condition as true. So that is how AND function works. All right. So how do we combine it with if? So I will just come over and clean that up. So what do we say? We start with an if function, and then we in the logical test we make use of the and, so that we can make comparison between two or more conditions, right? So I'll just pick that and say and the quantity is greater than 2, comma, and the customer ID is greater than 20, right? In that case, return the customer as bulk and prestige, else return the customer not bulk. Okay, sorry, that's mistakenly clicked outside, and of course that happens because we are still writing the formula. So you just hit enter, and then you see the returns here as not bulk. So or we can also just call this lower tier. Anything you would choose to call it is fine. Yeah. All right. So if you take a look again, this is just redoing what we did, but this time around we are adding if condition to an and, so that we can return a value that is preferred. So here we have this guy marked as bulk and prestige, 24. So quantity is 3, and then customer ID is 38, bulk and prestige. The rest are then marked as lower tier. So this is how you can quickly combine your if and functions to return things that are very, very, interesting here. You know, a lot of business intelligence that you can do with this, filtering out customers, establishing categories, customer segmentation, just a bit of it, not the machine learning end now, right? Okay, all right, so enough of that. So we just look at another condition here, which is or logical function. So here we are saying that If any of these is true, so return this, else return lower tier. So all condition checked in such a way that if one of the values is true, then the function is true, or the logical test is true. Okay, so if we do that here and we hit enter, then this value turns to bulk and prestige. So meaning that in this our case, the customer ID is greater than 20, so it returns bulk and prestige. And when you hit enter, you would see that all of this is then marked out for you. So this is how you can quickly combine logical functions, making use of if to return some serious intelligence in your data. All right, so now we'll be taking a look at lookup functions. So the likes of VLOOKUP, H2CUP, index, and match. So we'll just see how that works in our data. So these are basically functions that help you check for certain values to return corresponding values to it. So we'll begin with VLOOKUP. So VLOOKUP works across columns. The full name is vertical lookup. So basically what it does is that it tries to check for a value and then returns the corresponding value across the column. So here our lookup value to begin with, we want to look up order IDs. So we'll pick our order ID here, being 90060 as a lookup value. And then we'll pick the table array, which in this case, it's this table. So I will just go ahead and specify that because I already know the range for the table. So I have 854. And just in case you're wondering how to, if you check the previous video, I already explained how you can get to the end of your data without scrolling through. Just do Control Shift with your down arrow key pressed just once and you'll be there. All right, so hold Control and Shift together, then press the down arrow key. It will highlight the data that you want for the range that you want. Okay, so moving on, the index here is the column index number. So once you return order dates, if you count, you have 1, 2, and 3. So means that order date is in column 3. So I'll specify 3 as the column number. Next is the type of match. So we want to do an exact match so that our value can be trusted. So I will do false. So Excel already populates what to specify. Approximate match is true, exact match is false. So I'll choose exact match, which is false, and then I'll close the bracket. Good. So we have our value 23rd of June. If we double click, it populates here. If you try to validate with 90012, you would see 18th of June 2022, which shows that it is accurate. All right, so that said, that is how you can quickly do VLOOKUP operations that would, get you the values that you're looking for. Assuming I want to search for product ID, the process is the same. VLOOKUP, I'll pick that, and then I specify my array. It dates to, I'm stopping at L54. Okay, and then I'll just specify the column where the product ID is. In this case, it is column 4. So I would specify 4, and then I'll specify the kind of match it is it false match? Is it exact match? And then there we go. So you have product ID returned, P37. If you scroll down, P17 corresponds to 90012. All right, so you can do the same thing to populate quantity. Okay, perform the same set of operation. I mean, with HLOOKUP. HLOOKUP, it's not so widely used because it means you would need to know the row number where the value of interest is in your data. So what do? You just start as well with HLOOKUP. Open up your brackets, specify the lookup value. So in this case, HLOOKUP searches across rows. So because we are looking up product ID, would have to specify product ID as the value, and then you have a comma, and then you insert the table array. So in this case, our array is the same thing, 854, and then you have your row index number. So in this case, you will need to know your row index number. So in the case of 90060, the row index number is 61, because of course you have the title or the column header, and then you have values. So apparently 90060 will fall at 61, and then you have a comma, and then you specify the kind of match. So in our case, we have we'll do, you can choose one. So just scroll and choose what you want there. So one being exact match, the other being approximate. So, or of course, you could just quickly specify that as false and hit enter. So it returns P37. So if you scroll to 90060, you would find that the corresponding product ID is P37. Alright, so that explains how VLOOKUP and HLOOKUP works, and you can use that to perform some lookup functions in your data. So moving on, we want to look at index and match. So this is another function or list of functions that you would find in most data analysis interviews. We want you to do things with index match, just to assess your level of understanding of functions. Okay, so let's quickly explain this before we combine the functions and see how it works. Beginning with match. So match returns a value, which can be row number or column number depending on how it is specified. So a value that corresponds to the lookup value. So it can return a row number that corresponds to a lookup value, or it can return a column number that corresponds to a lookup value. So let's get it started. So assuming I am still working with product ID, and first off, I want to return the row number for 90060. So assuming I do not know that it is 61, and I want to find the row number that corresponds to 90060. All right, so you want to stay within your array. So instead of picking in the whole data and then getting Excel wondering what's happening here, right? So the lookup array in this case is going to be that column where the values are. So in this case, we'll do A to 854, and then we'll do an exact match. So you now see that it returns exactly 61, which is the row number of interest. All right, so you could also use match to return column number. So you just do the same thing, begin with an equal to, and then you can hit your tab to pick the formula, then pick the lookup value. So in this case, we want to look up the column number that corresponds to product ID. So the lookup value in this case is product ID. So you can pick it here, put a comma. The lookup array, it's the column names. You pick that. Then the kind of match here, it's exact match. You close the bracket, and then it returns 4. So if you try to do your check here just to validate, product ID is in the D column, and that is why we have 4. So row 61 for 90060, the product ID is D, and that's on that. All right, so that said, let's say we now want to move on. Okay, so before we move on to combine the two formulas, let's quickly look at how index function works, right? So we can then make use of an index function, begin with an index, open a bracket, specify the array to search from, And in this case, we are going to have A1 to G854. I'm giving it the entire table there as the data came. Then you specify the row number here, which we already returned with a match, and then pick the column number here. So you look at the two options that index has in it, three actually, but we are sticking to two, three, four actually, we are sticking to three here. So have array, row number, and column number. So array here in the entire table, the row number being the 61, the column number being 4, and then we close the brackets. So when we do that drop, we have P37. So P37, of course, should be the product that corresponds to 90060. Let's verify if we did the right thing there. Okay, 90060, this is it. This is P37, so we are correct. All right, so we move on. So now we are going to combine index and match. Okay, so we'll begin with an index. Remember that index needs an array, and then it needs a row number, and then it needs a column number. Okay, so our array in this case is the entire table. So we specify that, and then what we're basically doing is to lock it up. So how we lock up values in Excel, it's with the use of dollar symbol. So when you put a dollar in front of a column, it means you're locking up that column. You put it in front of a row number, it means you're locking up that row. So in this case, we're locking up both row and column, and that is what we've done to lock up the entire array of the table. Next is to specify the row number that we want to match. So here basically we want to use order ID to fill up order dates, to fill up product ID, and to fill up delivery status. Okay, so our lookup value in this case it's 90060, so we pick it. Now a couple of, so just recall what we want to do, and we want to be able to drag this around to dynamically fill order values. So since we are considering row here, we would want to lock up the column. So the essence of what we are doing is so that when I drag this, or when you drag this down, it will remain in the column K, and then it will be able to pick the next value, because the row number being 2, it's dynamic. So it will be able to move from 2 to 3 to 4, but remaining in column K. Okay, is that clear enough? All right, so we specify our lookup array. So we are looking up row here. So we look, so the row where other ID exists is row A. So we specify that, and we want to also lock it up so that it doesn't go beyond the range searching for what does not exist. Okay, and you just do that and it's locked. You have a comma, and then the kind of match you want here is exact match, so we pick 0. Have an equal. So next we want to specify the column number. So we make use of match again, open and close the bracket so that you do not forget. And then we pick, so this time around we're looking at column number. So once we populate order dates, we pick the column order dates. So because we want to populate column, what do? We lock up the row. It's very simple. Right, so for row number, lock up the column, or column number, lock up the row. It's just that straightforward. So when you lock up the row, what happens here is that when you drag this to the right, it will stay, it will move from L to M, so it will search for product ID without coming down. So we can move L to M, M to N, and so on. Right, and then you have a comma. Specify the lookup array for the columns. So in our case, This is our lookup array for our columns. So we also lock it up so that it doesn't go beyond the scope, searching for what doesn't exist. And then we'll have the type of match here, which is exact match. And then you hit enter. So once that is done, it returns 23rd of June 2022, which is the value, the order date. So we just drag it down first off to verify that this is still fine. So 90012 is the order date for this order ID. So we can now move this to the right to populate the other values and see how it works. So the product ID for 90060 is P37. This is P 07 90012 P17. Good. Yeah, correct. All right. So how about delivery status 90012 as well? Is it delivered? Shipped? Yes, it's shipped. So you say that we are correct. Thank you for watching this video. Please like and subscribe to this channel now.